A police sergeant came home to snowy Silver Creek believing the money he sent each month had kept his mother safe. But his retired German Shepherd, Hawker, stopped beneath a streetlight and refused to move on. Sitting there in the winter cold was the woman Corbin had spoken to just 3 days earlier, his own mother. She recognized Hawker before she recognized her son, and the small paper bag at her feet held almost nothing to eat. Corbin had trusted his brother, trusted the paid bills, and trusted the words, "I'm fine." What he uncovered forced him to face a harder truth. Caring for someone from a distance is not the same as truly being there. Share your own touching or unforgettable story about an animal you love, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. By the time Corbin Hayes turned off the interstate toward Silver Creek, the sky had taken on the hard, crystalline blue that came only after a day of clean winter cold. Snow covered the shoulders of the road in smooth white banks. Pine branches bowed under the weight of it, and the last light of evening still caught on the higher ridges, turning them pale gold before fading toward gray. Corbin drove with one hand resting lightly on the wheel. At 46, he had spent enough years in police work to recognize what exhaustion did to a man. It shortened his patience, made small noises louder, made every stoplight seem personal. The past 2 weeks had been full of late calls, paperwork, and the kind of problems that never ended when a shift officially did. So when his captain had approved 4 days off, Corbin had surprised even himself by deciding to drive north instead of staying home in Colorado Springs. Almost a year had passed since he had last seen his mother. He had reasons for that. Good ones, mostly, or at least reasons that sounded good when he listed them. His schedule changed constantly. Silver Creek was nearly 4 hours away in winter. His younger brother Darren lived close enough to check on Althea. Corbin sent money every month, automatic transfers on the same date, enough to cover groceries, heating, medication, and anything the old house might need. There were phone calls, too, not long ones, but there were calls. 3 nights earlier, Althea had sounded tired but cheerful. "I'm doing fine, sweetheart." That was what she always said. Corbin had believed her. In the rear seat, Hawker shifted against the thick protective cover spread across the leather. The 7-year-old German Shepherd had once occupied the back of a patrol SUV like it was a second office. Even after retirement from regular K-9 duty, the habit remained. Hawker never sprawled carelessly. He sat upright or lay with his front paws aligned, always appearing to wait for the next instruction. Age had softened some things. A faint dusting of gray had begun around his dark muzzle. After long drives, his right hip stiffened before he worked it loose. But his ears remained sharp, including the left one with the small V-shaped notch near the tip, and his amber-brown eyes missed little. Corbin glanced at him through the mirror. Almost there. Hawker blinked once. On the passenger seat sat a paper shopping bag containing 2 things Corbin had picked up before leaving Colorado Springs: a tin of Althea's favorite black tea and a deep teal wool scarf. He had almost bought flowers. Flowers felt wrong in January. The scarf had seemed more practical. That was the kind of gift Corbin understood. Something useful, something that solved a problem. He passed the old gas station at the edge of town, then the church with its white steeple rising beyond a row of bare maples. Silver Creek looked smaller than he remembered. Snow softened the edges of everything: the sidewalks, parked trucks, low storefronts, even the rusted sign above the diner where his mother used to take him and Darren after Sunday service. A few people were still out. A pickup rolled past with skis strapped to the roof. An older couple crossed in front of the pharmacy. A plow moved slowly along a side street, pushing fresh powder toward the curb. Normal, ordinary. Corbin felt himself relax in increments. Maybe this trip had been overdue. Maybe he would fix the loose railing on his mother's back steps, replace the weather stripping Darren had mentioned in October. Take Althea to dinner somewhere she would complain was too expensive. 4 days. Then back to work. He turned onto Alder Street. Hawker stood. The movement was immediate enough that Corbin noticed. The dog had been lying down only a second earlier. Now all 4 paws were planted beneath him, body angled toward the passenger side window. Corbin checked the road. Nothing. Hawker? The German shepherd made a low sound in his throat. Not a growl. Something closer to a restrained whine. Corbin glanced toward the sidewalk. A narrow strip of snow ran past a closed hardware store, a laundromat, and an old household goods shop with dark windows. Probably a cat. Hawker had never been careless around animals, but retirement had made him more interested in things Corbin once would have dismissed. "Leave it." Corbin drove another 20 yards. Hawker did not sit. His nose moved close to the glass. Then came one sharp bark. Corbin's foot hit the brake before his conscious mind caught up. The SUV slowed hard enough to make the shopping bag tip against the center console. "Hawker!" Another whine. The dog stared behind them. Corbin looked into the mirror, then over his shoulder. Under a streetlight near the darkened household goods store sat a figure he had barely registered while passing. Someone was on the bench, an elderly woman, judging by the shape of her. Corbin exhaled through his nose. Silver Creek nights in January were no place for anyone to sit outside for long. He pulled to the curb. "This what you're worked up about?" Hawker was already turning in place, waiting for the door. Corbin got out first. Cold immediately pushed through the open front of his charcoal winter jacket. He zipped it higher, walked around the SUV, then opened Hawker's door and clipped the working lead to the dog's collar. Hawker stepped down carefully because of his hip. The moment all 4 paws touched pavement, his posture changed. His tail lowered, his ears stayed forward, and he pulled, not violently, but with an urgency Corbin had not felt from him in years. Easy. The sidewalk crunched beneath Corbin's boots. The woman sat with her shoulders rounded inward, both hands held close to her body. A brown paper bag rested near one foot. Snow had gathered along one corner of the bench and in the folds of her skirt. She wore a faded burgundy wool coat. Too thin for the temperature? Her head was bowed. Silver hair had slipped loose from a low knot at the back of her neck. Corbin slowed. Something inside him shifted. Not recognition. Not yet. Just resistance. A sense that his mind had seen something before his understanding had caught up. Hawker pulled again. "Hey." Corbin's voice came softer now. "Ma'am?" The woman lifted her head. Her face was pale in the streetlight, deeply tired, the skin around her eyes darker than it should have been. She startled when she saw him. Her hands tightened around each other. Corbin stopped several feet away. Police work had taught him that approaching frightened people too quickly usually accomplished the opposite of what you wanted. "It's okay," he said. "I'm not going to bother you." Hawker stood beside him, trembling, not from cold, Corbin realized, but from restraint. The dog knew something. Corbin looked at the woman again, gray hair, thin face, hazel green eyes. There was a faint curve at the corner of her mouth that appeared only when she was nervous. His chest tightened. No? The thought arrived before he could stop it. No? He looked at her left hand, a plain gold wedding band. His father had bought that ring more than 50 years ago. Corbin's body went strangely still. Hawker made the decision for him. The German shepherd stepped forward. Corbin could have stopped him with the leash. He didn't. Hawker approached slowly, lowering his head until his nose touched the back of the woman's hand. She flinched, then froze. Her eyes dropped to the dog. For several long seconds, she stared at the V-shaped notch in Hawker's left ear. Her fingers moved. Barely. They brushed the fur behind it. "Hawker?" The word came out thin and uncertain. Corbin forgot the cold. Forgot the street. Forgot every explanation he had been carrying for 11 months. His mother had recognized his dog before she recognized him. "Mom?" Althea Hayes turned toward the voice. Corbin had seen fear on hundreds of faces. He had seen confusion, shock, relief. He had never expected to see all three on his mother's face while she looked directly at him. He stepped closer and crouched until they were nearly eye level. "Mom, it's Corbin." Althea stared. Her lips parted slightly. Nothing came. Corbin searched her expression for some familiar response. A frown at his unshaven face, a complaint that he looked tired, anything that belonged to the woman who had raised 2 sons on a school office salary and refused to let either leave the house with wrinkled clothes. Instead, she looked at him as if she were trying to place a man she had met years ago. Something cold moved through Corbin that had nothing to do with winter. "Mom?" Hawker pressed his shoulder against Althea's knees. That seemed to settle her more than Corbin's voice. She looked down and placed one fragile hand against the dog's neck. Hawker did not move. Corbin noticed how thin her fingers were. Then he noticed everything else. Her shoes were worn through at one edge. Her coat did not close properly. Her cheeks had hollowed. There was no hat, no gloves. He had spoken with her 3 days ago. He had asked if she needed anything. She had laughed. "I've got more than I know what to do with." Corbin had smiled when she said it. Now the memory felt unbearable. He removed his winter jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. Althea started to protest. "You'll get cold." "I'm fine." The words left his mouth before he realized what they were. For one strange second, they simply looked at each other. The same lie. Different voices. Corbin swallowed. "Let me worry about that." Althea looked away. Hawker moved closer, placing his body against her lower legs as if he understood that warmth could be given without asking permission. Corbin reached for the paper bag at her feet. "What's this?" Althea's fingers tightened around the edge. "Just some things." He opened it. A plastic bottle with perhaps 2 inches of water remaining. 2 individually wrapped crackers. Nothing else. Corbin stared into the bag. His mind began automatically assembling facts. Temperature below freezing. Inadequate clothing. No transportation visible. Little food. Physical weakness. Confusion. But beneath the police officer cataloging details, another voice was forming. A son's voice, much less controlled. He looked toward the road leading to Althea's house, 3 blocks away. Darren lived less than 15 minutes from here. Corbin had sent money 9 days earlier. Every fact he had relied on suddenly seemed to have a hole through the middle. Althea touched his sleeve. It was such a small movement that he almost missed it. "Don't be upset." Corbin looked at her, at his mother sitting beneath a streetlight in the Colorado cold, wrapped in the jacket he had been wearing 5 minutes earlier. He wanted to ask 100 questions. "Why are you here? Where is Darren? When did you last eat? Why didn't you call me? What happened to the money?" But none of them was the right question yet. He took her hand instead. Her fingers were colder than his. Hawker remained pressed against her legs. Corbin looked once more into the almost empty paper bag. The question that settled inside him was quieter than anger and heavier than fear. How long had his mother been living like this while he believed everything was fine? The emergency entrance at Silver Creek Community Hospital was brighter than Corbin remembered. Too bright for the hour, too clean, too ordinary. That bothered him more than it should have. Nothing in the hallway reflected what had just happened outside. A television mounted near the waiting area played a weather report with the sound turned low. A vending machine hummed beside 2 empty chairs. Somewhere behind a closed door, a cart rolled across tile and stopped. The world had not changed. Corbin's had. Althea had been taken through a set of double doors less than 10 minutes earlier. Hawker remained beside Corbin, standing close enough that the shepherd's shoulder touched his leg. The dog had been reluctant to let the staff wheel Althea away until Corbin gave a quiet command. "Stay." Hawker had obeyed. Barely. Now the dog stared at the doors. Corbin stared at his phone. Darren's name sat near the top of his contacts. He did not call yet. That surprised him. On the drive to the hospital, Corbin had imagined doing exactly that. He had imagined Darren answering half asleep, and Corbin asking one question in a voice so calm that his brother would immediately understand something had gone terribly wrong. Instead, Corbin opened his banking app. The screen loaded. He went to scheduled transfers. There they were. Every month. Same account. Same amount. No missed payments. January, December, November, October. He kept scrolling. A year of transfers. Then another. Corbin leaned back against the hospital wall. For years, those payments had comforted him. They had been proof. Not emotional proof, perhaps, but proof of action. He had done something. Heating cost more in Silver Creek every winter. Property taxes rose. Groceries were expensive. Althea's prescriptions were not always fully covered. Corbin had calculated what she needed, then added more. He had told himself that was responsibility. The numbers on the screen had once meant protection. Tonight they looked like evidence of how little he had actually known. A nurse came through the doors. "Sergeant Hayes?" Corbin looked up. The nurse was young, perhaps early 30s, with tired eyes and a calm voice. She glanced once at Hawker, then at Corbin. "Dr. Vance will speak with you shortly. Your mother is stable." "Stable?" Corbin nodded. "Thank you." The nurse hesitated. She asked about the dog. For the first time since leaving Alder Street, something in Corbin's face changed. What did she say? She asked if Hawker was still here. Corbin looked down. Hawker was still watching the doors. "Yeah," Corbin said. "He's here." The nurse gave a small smile. "I'll let her know." When she disappeared again, Corbin lowered his hand to Hawker's neck. The shepherd leaned into the pressure for half a second before returning his attention forward. "She remembers you?" Corbin murmured. It should have comforted him. Instead, it opened another question. Why had she recognized Hawker first? Was it because the dog looked the same to her? Because memory worked in strange directions? Or because Corbin himself had become less familiar than he wanted to admit? He stopped that thought before it could go further. Not because it was impossible. Because he was not ready for it. 20 minutes later, a woman in a white coat approached from the far end of the corridor. Dr. Lenora Vance moved with the efficient pace of someone accustomed to people watching her face for answers. She was in her mid-40s, tall and slim, with auburn hair gathered into a low knot and a pair of thin rectangular glasses resting halfway down her nose. A black fountain pen was clipped neatly into the pocket over a burgundy scrub top. She did not begin with reassurance. Corbin respected that immediately. "Sergeant Hayes?" "Corbin is fine." She nodded once. "I'm Lenora Vance. I've been evaluating your mother." Corbin straightened. "How is she?" "She's resting." The doctor folded her arms loosely. "She's significantly dehydrated. She's also underweight for her height and age, and her blood work suggests she hasn't been eating consistently for some time." Corbin's expression stayed still. His thumb moved across the edge of his black wristwatch. Once, then again. "What does sometime mean?" Lenora considered the question carefully. "Not a few missed meals." Corbin waited. "Longer." "How long?" "I can't give you an exact timeline from one examination, but based on what we're seeing, this did not start this week." The answer entered him slowly. He looked down the hallway. "Her medication?" "That's another concern." Corbin looked back. "She's prescribed medication for blood pressure and another medication that should be taken regularly. From what she told us, and from what we can see, she hasn't been taking them consistently." "Why?" We don't know yet. I sent money. Lenora's expression changed very slightly. Not judgment, recognition. Corbin heard himself and almost hated the sentence. It sounded defensive, as if money could respond on his behalf. I understand, Lenora said. No, I mean, enough? More than enough? I believe you. That somehow made it worse. Corbin looked through the narrow glass panel in the door beside them. What happens now? We rehydrate her carefully, run additional tests, make sure there isn't an infection or another condition contributing to the confusion, and give her time to rest. Confusion. Lenora nodded. You said she didn't immediately recognize you. She recognized Hawker. The doctor glanced toward the shepherd. That doesn't necessarily tell us exactly what's happening neurologically. Familiar emotional associations can sometimes remain accessible even when someone is exhausted, dehydrated, frightened, or temporarily disoriented. Corbin absorbed the words. Temporarily, he held on to that one. Lenora seemed to notice. I don't want to speculate before we have more information. Good. A faint understanding passed between them. Neither of them liked pretending certainty existed where it did not. Lenora opened the door. You can see her now? Hawker immediately rose. The doctor looked at the dog. Corbin said, If he's a problem, I'll keep him outside. Lenora considered Hawker, then the room beyond. Keep him calm and off the bed. Corbin almost smiled. That won't be difficult. Inside, Althea looked smaller than she had beneath the streetlight. There was no winter coat now, no bench, no darkness to disguise anything. Her silver-brown hair had been loosened from its knot and lay against the pillow. A monitor glowed beside the bed. An IV line ran to her arm. Corbin stopped before reaching the chair. For a second, he felt like he had walked into the wrong room. The woman in front of him did not fit with his memory of Althea standing at a kitchen counter telling him he was slicing onions incorrectly. Hawker walked in. His entire posture softened. The German shepherd approached the side of the bed and sat. Althea's eyes opened. She looked first at Hawker. Her hand shifted against the blanket. Hawker. The dog lifted his muzzle. Then she looked at Corbin. This time, recognition arrived. Slowly, but it arrived. Her brow tightened. Corbin? He pulled the chair closer. Yeah. She studied him as if confirming something. You came. I came. You look tired. Corbin let out something that was almost a laugh. So do you. Althea gave the faintest smile. It disappeared quickly. Her eyes moved toward the ceiling. You shouldn't have driven all this way at night. Corbin stared at her. There it was, not an explanation. Concern for him, even now. Mom, I found you sitting outside. I know. In January. I know what month it is. I didn't say you didn't. The edge in his voice came out sharper than he intended. Althea withdrew slightly. Corbin caught it immediately. He lowered his tone. Sorry. Silence settled. Hawker lay down beside the bed. Althea reached toward him, but could not quite reach his head. Corbin moved the chair aside, and Hawker shifted closer on his own. Her fingers found the fur behind his left ear. The motion was automatic, familiar. Corbin watched her hand move over the little notch in the ear tip. For years, he had thought of Hawker as the animal that knew him better than almost anyone. Standing there, he realized Hawker belonged to a much wider map of memory than that. Althea closed her eyes for a moment. Corbin waited. Then he asked, When did you last eat? Her eyes opened. I ate. What? She frowned. You always were pushy. What did you eat? I don't remember. Corbin said nothing. Althea looked away. Beatrice brought soup. When? Recently. How recently? "Oh, Corbin." "Mom." She turned back to him. There was irritation there now, and something beneath it. Embarrassment. That stopped him more effectively than anger would have. Corbin changed the question. "Why didn't you call me?" Althea's face softened. "You work." "That's not an answer." "It is an answer." "No," she sighed. "You have a job where people call you because something is wrong. I wasn't going to become one more call." Corbin sat very still. Outside the room, someone laughed quietly at the nurse's station. The sound felt impossibly far away. "You're my mother." "And you're my son?" "That's why you call." "That's why I didn't." Corbin looked at her. He could not immediately understand the sentence. Althea continued. "You've always carried too much, even when you were little." "This isn't about when I was little." "No, it's about now." Her voice weakened slightly. "You've got your work, Hawker, your own life." "And Darren?" The name changed the room, not dramatically, just enough. Althea's fingers paused in Hawker's fur. Corbin saw it. "Darren lives 15 minutes away." "He's busy." "Doing what?" "Things." "What things?" "Don't start." Corbin leaned back. "I haven't started anything." "I know that face." "What face?" "The one that means somebody's already guilty before you finish asking questions." Corbin almost responded, then stopped. She was right. Not about Darren. He did not know enough about Darren, but she was right about him. Corbin took a breath. "Okay." Althea seemed surprised. "Okay?" "I'm asking, not deciding." Her eyes softened slightly. Corbin waited. Finally she said, "Darren has had a hard year." "What does that have to do with you being outside with 2 crackers?" Althea closed her eyes. There was no answer. Corbin looked at Hawker. The shepherd had rested his chin against the edge of the mattress. Althea's fingertips remained buried in the fur at his neck. Corbin thought about the phone call 3 days earlier. He could still hear her voice. "Fine. Everything's fine." He had been filling out an incident report while talking to her. He remembered that now. His headset had been crooked against one ear, half his attention on the report, half on his mother, maybe less than half. "Did Darren bring you groceries?" "Sometimes." "Did he take you to appointments?" "He used to." "Used to?" Althea opened her eyes. "Corbin, please." There was exhaustion in the words. He stopped, not because he had enough answers, because for once he recognized that getting answers and helping were not the same thing. He reached for the blanket and adjusted it lightly near her shoulder. Althea watched him. Then, almost as if she were confessing to something shameful, she said, "Some people from church helped. And Beatrice." Corbin's hand stopped. "Helped with what?" "Food. Little things." His jaw tightened. Althea noticed immediately. "Don't be angry with them." "I'm not." She knew what he meant. Don't be angry with Darren. Corbin looked at her. "I don't know enough yet to be angry with Darren." It was technically true. Emotionally, it was not. Althea's eyelids began to lower. The medication, warmth, and exhaustion were catching up with her. Corbin stayed seated until her breathing became deeper. Hawker did not move. After several minutes, Corbin quietly stood and stepped into the hallway. He took out his phone. His banking app was still open. The transfers remained on the screen. Perfectly regular, perfectly useless as an explanation. He closed the app. Then he called Darren. The phone rang once, twice, 5 times. Voicemail. Corbin ended the call without leaving a message. He stared at Darren's name for several seconds before lowering the phone. Behind the glass, his mother slept with one hand resting near Hawker's head. Corbin had spent years believing distance could be made responsible through discipline. Send the money? Make the calls. Trust the person closer to the problem. Keep moving. Tonight, every part of that system still appeared to have worked on paper, and somehow his mother had still ended up hungry. That contradiction was no longer something he could explain away. It was something he would have to understand. By 8 the next morning, Silver Creek had turned bright enough to hurt the eyes. The storm from 2 nights earlier had moved east, leaving behind a hard blue sky and clean white roofs. Sunlight bounced off the snowbanks lining the streets, making the whole town look sharper than it had in the dark. Corbin left the hospital after Althea finally fell into a deeper sleep. Hawker rode in the back seat again, quieter than usual. Corbin did not call Darren a second time. Not yet. The unanswered call had irritated him, but irritation was not evidence. Years of police work had taught him the danger of deciding what a silence meant before facts caught up. That lesson was easier to follow with strangers. With family, it felt almost unnatural. He drove toward his mother's house with no radio playing. A mile from Alder Street, he stopped at a convenience store and bought coffee. He took one sip. It tasted burnt. He drank it anyway. The house came into view at the end of the block. White siding, dark green shutters, a narrow porch. The same brass numbers his father had mounted beside the door almost 30 years ago. From the street, nothing appeared wrong. That bothered Corbin immediately. There should have been a sign, a broken window, an open door, something obvious enough to justify what he had found the night before. Instead, the walkway had even been partially cleared. Snow rested evenly across the roof. The curtains were closed. It looked like a house waiting for someone to wake up inside. Corbin parked. Hawker stood before the engine, fully stopped. Easy. The shepherd watched the front door. Corbin took out the spare key Althea had insisted he keep years ago. He had almost forgotten it was still on his ring. The lock turned without resistance. Cold air met him inside. Not outdoor cold, house cold. The kind that told him the thermostat had been set too low for someone Althea's age. Corbin stepped into the living room and stopped. For several seconds he did not understand what he was looking at. The room was too large. Then his mind corrected itself. It was not larger. It was emptier. The sofa was gone. So was the television. A rectangular patch of cleaner wall marked where the television mount had been. The oak coffee table his father had refinished twice was missing. Only one end table remained, pushed beneath the front window as if somebody had forgotten to take it. Corbin closed the door behind him. Hawker entered slowly. The dog's nose moved across the air. His body language was different from the night before. No urgency, no pulling, searching. Corbin walked into the room. His boots sounded too loud on the bare floor. He remembered Thanksgiving here 5 years earlier. Althea had complained there were too many people in the kitchen. Darren had fallen asleep on the sofa during a football game. Hawker had discovered that if he rested his head on Althea's knee long enough, she eventually gave him turkey. Corbin could place every piece of furniture from memory. That made the empty spaces worse. He went to the kitchen. The refrigerator remained, but almost nothing was inside. A carton of milk several days past its date, mustard, half a jar of applesauce, 2 eggs, a plastic container with something dried against the bottom. Corbin shut the door. The microwave was missing. He looked at the counter where it had once stood. A faint square of discoloration remained. One of the kitchen chairs was gone. So was the small radio Althea used every morning. He opened a cabinet. 3 plates, 2 mugs, a stack of canned vegetables. The next cabinet was almost empty. Corbin rested both hands against the counter, not from shock anymore. He was beginning to understand the pattern. This was not what a burglar left behind. There was no disorder, no broken drawer, no cabinet dumped onto the floor. Someone had decided what could leave, one thing at a time. Hawker moved down the hallway. Corbin followed. The first room had once belonged to Darren. Now it held 2 cardboard boxes and an old folding chair. The guest room still had a dresser, but no mattress. Then Corbin reached Althea's bedroom. He stopped in the doorway. The bed was gone. Not just the frame. Everything. In its place, against the far wall, lay a narrow foam mattress on the floor. A gray blanket had been folded over it. One pillow. Nothing else. Corbin did not move. There were moments in police work when anger arrived loudly, raised voices, adrenaline, an urge to do something immediately. This was not one of them. This anger had nowhere to go. It became precision. Corbin stepped inside. Hawker reached the mattress first. The German shepherd lowered his nose to the blanket. He sniffed once, then again. A small sound escaped him. Not a bark, not the strained whine from the street. Something quieter. Corbin looked down. Yeah? He did not know why he answered the dog. Maybe because Hawker was the only other living thing in the room that understood who had slept there. Corbin noticed a wooden coaster beside the mattress. A glass ring marked its center. No nightstand, no lamp, no proper bed. Just a coaster on the floor. That detail affected him more than the missing television. His mother had adapted. That was what people did when conditions worsened slowly enough. They adjusted, moved the glass lower, sat where the chair still existed. Ate what remained. Eventually, what should have felt unacceptable became simply Tuesday. Corbin bent and picked up the coaster. A voice came from behind him. I wondered how long it would take you to come over. Corbin turned. A woman stood at the bedroom doorway. She was in her early 70s, tall but narrow through the shoulders, wearing a rust-red quilted coat over dark wool trousers. Her silver hair was cut into a straight bob at her jaw, and tortoise-shell glasses sat low on a face that seemed built for noticing things people hoped would go unnoticed. She held a stainless steel coffee mug in one gloved hand. Corbin recognized her after a second. Mrs. Morrow. Beatrice. She looked past him at the mattress. Her expression tightened. I saw your SUV? Corbin straightened. You still live next door? Since 1987. There was no warmth in the answer, not hostility either, something more earned. Corbin nodded toward the hall. Can we talk? I've been trying. That stopped him. Beatrice turned and walked toward the living room without waiting. Corbin followed. Hawker came behind him but paused to sniff Beatrice's coat as she passed. She looked down. Hawker? The dog's ears shifted. You remember me? Hawker sniffed her hand. Beatrice gave him one brief stroke between the ears. At least somebody does? Corbin heard the point. He let it stand. They stopped in the bare living room. Beatrice looked around as if she still hated seeing it. When did this start? Corbin asked. She took a sip of coffee. What part? The furniture? 6 months ago, maybe a little more. Who took it? Beatrice looked directly at him. Darren. Corbin's jaw set. You saw him? Many times. What did he say? At first, that your mother wanted to simplify. Corbin glanced toward the empty space where the sofa had been. And later? He stopped explaining. Beatrice moved toward the window. Started with things nobody would panic about. An extra chair, a cabinet from the hall, some tools from the garage. She pointed toward the wall. Then the television. Her eyes shifted toward the kitchen. Microwave? Washer? Dining set? The bed? Beatrice's mouth tightened. I saw him load the frame. Corbin said nothing. I asked him what Althea was supposed to sleep on. What did he say? That he had another bed coming? Corbin waited. Beatrice shook her head. No bed came. Something inside Corbin settled into a colder shape. How long was she sleeping on that mattress? I can't tell you exactly. Estimate. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. You asking as her son or as a cop? The question irritated him because it was fair. As her son. Then stop sounding like you're taking a statement. Corbin exhaled. His thumb found the bezel of his watch. He stopped himself from turning it. Okay. Beatrice studied him. Months. The answer landed without drama. Corbin looked down. Did Darren know she wasn't eating? He knew enough. That's not what I asked. I'm aware. Beatrice crossed her arms. I don't know what was in his head. I know what I saw. She began counting on her fingers. I brought soup. Margaret Lewis from church brought casseroles. Tom from the pharmacy delivered medication twice after she said she couldn't get there. Corbin looked up sharply. She couldn't get there, why? Her car disappeared. Corbin stared at her. What? You didn't know that either? He ignored the sting. When? Late fall? Darren take it? I saw him drive it away. Corbin turned toward the front window. Snow reflected against the glass. He remembered paying the insurance renewal. He had paid it 3 months ago. The car he had insured was apparently not even there. Beatrice's voice softened for the first time. Your mother made excuses for him. Corbin looked back. She still is. I figured. She told me Darren had a hard year. Beatrice gave a tired laugh without humor. Althea could find a reason to forgive a tree for falling on her roof. Despite himself, Corbin almost smiled. It disappeared. Why didn't you call me? Beatrice's face changed. Not surprise, disappointment. I did. Corbin became still. She set the coffee mug on the remaining end table and took out her phone. Her movements were deliberate. No performance. She tapped the screen several times, then held it toward him. 2 outgoing calls, both to his number, one in October, one in November. Then a text. Corbin read it. Corbin, something isn't right with your mother. Please call me when you can. His memory answered before he wanted it to. A late shift, 3 pending reports, a supervisor meeting the next morning. He remembered seeing the message. He had not called Beatrice. He had forwarded it to Darren. Corbin took out his own phone. He searched. The exchange was still there. Beatrice's message, then Corbin's forward. Then Darren. She worries too much. Mom's okay. I've got it handled. Corbin stared at the screen. There was no mystery in that moment. No hidden clue. No information he had been denied. Someone had told him something was wrong. He had chosen the answer requiring the least from him. Beatrice did not say anything. That was worse. Corbin locked the phone. Why didn't you keep calling? The question came out harsher than he intended. Beatrice's expression hardened. I'm her neighbor, Corbin, not her son. Silence filled the room. Hawker sat between them. Corbin looked away first. You're right. Beatrice's face softened just slightly. I wish I wasn't. Corbin walked toward the window. Across the yard, Beatrice's house stood under a thick cap of snow. A cleared path ran from her back door toward Althea's property. He imagined her carrying soup across it. Once, twice. How many times? You said Darren moved? Beatrice picked up the coffee mug again. A few months ago. Where? Denver. Corbin turned. You know where? No exact address. She hesitated. But I know the neighborhood. Which one? Crescent Heights. Corbin knew the area. New apartment buildings, restaurants with valet parking. Rent that did not fit the life Darren had last described to him. Beatrice watched the realization move across his face. One of the women from church saw him there, she said he looked like he was doing very well. Corbin looked around the nearly empty house. The foam mattress down the hall, the bare kitchen counter, the missing furniture. He did not allow himself to make the final connection yet, not without records, not without facts. But the shape of the question had changed. Darren was no longer simply the brother who had failed to answer a phone call. Corbin slipped his phone into his pocket. Beatrice headed toward the door. Before leaving, she stopped. "For what it's worth, your mother never blamed you." Corbin looked at her. "That doesn't make it better." "No." Beatrice opened the door. "It doesn't." Cold sunlight poured across the floor. Hawker walked back toward Althea's bedroom after she left. Corbin stayed where he was. For years he had assumed neglect would look obvious. Chaos, broken things, people crying for help. This house taught him otherwise. Sometimes it looked orderly. Sometimes the bills were still paid. Sometimes the person being failed continued saying everything was fine. And sometimes a warning arrived directly on your phone, and you handed it to somebody else because believing them was easier than coming home. Corbin looked at Darren's old message one more time. "I've got it handled." Then he looked around the empty room. Whatever Darren had handled, this was what remained. And now Corbin knew where he needed to look next. Corbin did not drive to Denver that morning. That was what he wanted to do. Instead, he sat in the parking lot outside a small accounting office 3 blocks from Silver Creek's courthouse and forced himself to wait until 9. The decision irritated every instinct he had. Police work trained people to act when a pattern became visible, ask questions while memories were fresh, preserve records, follow movement, close distance. But Darren was not a suspect in one of Corbin's cases. Althea was not an incident number, and if Corbin wanted the truth to matter later, he had to stay on the right side of the line from the beginning. So he did something far less satisfying than confronting his brother. He made appointments. The first was with a financial counselor recommended by the hospital social worker. The second was with Althea, because the counselor would not review anything without her permission. That second part mattered, more than Corbin wanted to admit. At the hospital, Althea was sitting upright when he returned. Color had begun to come back into her face, though only slightly. A gray cardigan was wrapped over her hospital gown, and her silver-brown hair had been brushed back from her forehead. Hawker lay beside the bed with his chin on his front paws. Althea looked at Corbin as he entered. "You look like you've been arguing with somebody." "I haven't." "That's worse." Corbin pulled the chair closer. He did not start with Darren. That was deliberate. "I need to ask you something about your bank account." Althea's expression changed. Not fear, guardedness. "Why?" "Because I've been sending money every month, and I need to understand what happened after it got there." She looked toward the window. The morning sun was bright against the snow outside. "I don't like people digging through my finances." "I know." "Your father never knew how much cash I kept in the kitchen." "I'm not Dad." "That's why I'm telling you." Despite himself, Corbin smiled once. Then the seriousness returned. "I'm not going to access anything without your permission." Althea looked back at him. He could tell the distinction mattered. "Not with your badge?" "No." "Not through one of your police systems?" "No." Her shoulders loosened slightly. Corbin leaned forward. "I want you to choose what gets looked at." Althea was quiet for a while. Then she nodded. "Fine." He expected relief. What he felt instead was responsibility. Her consent meant he could move forward. It also meant he no longer had the excuse of acting first and explaining later. 2 hours later, a financial counselor named Sheila Park sat across from them in a small consultation room at the hospital. Sheila was in her late 40s with short black hair, wireframe glasses, and a calm manner that made even uncomfortable subjects sound manageable. She did not speak to Corbin as though he were in charge, simply because he was the son standing closest to the paperwork. Most of her questions were directed to Althea. That pleased him. It also humbled him. "Mrs. Hayes, do you remember giving anyone permission to help with your bills?" Althea nodded. "Darren?" "When?" "After I fell in the driveway, 2 winters ago." Sheila glanced at Corbin, then back to Althea. Was that meant to be permanent? Althea frowned. No, I don't think so. You don't think so? I meant for him to help until I was steady again. Sheila wrote something down. Did you ever remove his access? Althea looked embarrassed. I suppose I never thought about it. Corbin said nothing. He was beginning to understand how ordinary the opening had been. Not deception at first. Convenience. A son helping his mother pay bills after a fall. No dramatic document, no obvious breach. Just access that remained longer than anyone intended. Sheila connected a laptop to a secure portal after Althea authorized the account review. The first months looked normal. Heating bill, pharmacy, groceries, property tax, a plumbing repair. Then smaller transfers appeared. $200, $300, $450. Corbin watched without speaking. Sheila asked, Do you recognize this account ending in 9904? Althea squinted at the screen. No? Corbin did. He knew the last 4 digits. Darren. His brother had used the same bank for years. Corbin leaned back. The room suddenly felt smaller. Sheila did not react to his expression. She kept scrolling. A month later, 600. Then 800. Then 1,000. The descriptions were vague. Home expense, repair, reimbursement, household. Some were legitimate. Sheila matched several withdrawals with actual bills, a furnace repair, a medical copay, a roof patch after an ice storm. That mattered. It would have been easier if everything were false. Instead, the truth was mixed with enough real responsibility to explain how the pattern had survived. Darren had helped. Then he had started helping himself. Corbin stared at the screen. He remembered being grateful for those months. Darren had called him once and said, I've got Mom's bills organized now. You don't have to worry. Corbin had thanked him, then stopped asking for details. Sheila moved further through the statements. The amounts grew, not dramatically, gradually. That was worse. A person could explain away a sudden theft as desperation. This looked like adjustment. A new amount becoming normal. Then another. Corbin asked, Can you show the dates next to my transfers? Sheila did. A pattern appeared almost immediately. Corbin's deposits arrived near the first of each month. Within 48 hours, money often moved elsewhere. He watched January, his transfer, then a withdrawal. December, his transfer, then another. November. Same thing. The simplicity of it unsettled him. For years he had believed the automatic deposit was the responsible part. Now he realized it might have made the system easier to exploit. Predictable money, predictable timing, no questions. Althea pressed her fingertips together. That can't all be Darren. Corbin looked at her. She did not sound certain. She sounded hopeful. Sheila kept her voice neutral. We're only identifying account activity right now. We're not assigning intent. Corbin appreciated that. Althea did too. He could tell. Then Sheila stopped scrolling. There are also several deposits from sales. Sales of what? Corbin asked. Sheila opened another set of documents. Furniture, appliances, a vehicle. Corbin looked sharply at Althea. Mom. She stared at the screen. I signed something about the car. You knew Darren sold it? He said I wasn't driving much. Were you okay with that? I thought he was going to put the money back into the house. Sheila asked gently. Did you receive any of it? Althea did not answer immediately. No? The word barely came out. Corbin stood and walked to the far wall. He needed distance from the table. Not from his mother, from the numbers. There was something brutal about figures arranged in neat columns. They did not raise their voices. They did not excuse themselves. They simply remained. Behind him, Althea said, There was $500 once. Corbin turned. What? She looked down at her hands. "I noticed it missing." "When?" "Last spring." "What did Darren say?" "He said he borrowed it." Corbin's jaw tightened. "He said he'd put it back after payday." "Did he?" "I don't know." Corbin stared at her. "You didn't check?" Althea's chin lifted. "Don't talk to me like I'm stupid." The response came sharp enough to stop him. "I didn't say that." "You were thinking it." "No." "You were." She looked away. Corbin sat again. He felt ashamed of the impatience that had entered his voice. Althea had already lost control of enough things. She did not need her older son turning every question into an examination. "Sorry." She said nothing. Hawker, who had been lying near the door, stood and crossed the room, not toward Corbin, toward Althea. The shepherd sat beside her chair. She placed a hand against his neck. Corbin watched. That small movement changed the temperature of the room, not because Hawker had discovered anything, because he had chosen where comfort was needed. Corbin lowered his voice. "What did Darren tell you?" Althea stroked Hawker behind the left ear. "He said he was behind on things." "What things?" "I didn't ask." "Why?" She looked at Corbin. "Because sometimes when one of your children says he's struggling, you don't make him prove it before you care." Corbin absorbed that. He wanted to say Darren had used that kindness, but Althea already knew. The shame in her face told him so. Sheila closed the laptop halfway. "I think this is enough for today." Corbin agreed. Outside the consultation room, he stood near a window while Althea rested. The mountains beyond Silver Creek were bright under the winter sun. Hawker sat beside him. Corbin looked at the notes Sheila had printed. The total was larger than he had expected, not enormous enough to transform a life overnight, but more than enough to explain a new apartment, a newer car, a different kind of comfort. He called a contact at the bank, not as a police officer, but as Althea's authorized family representative for this review, and requested instructions for preserving records properly. Then he called the hospital social worker, then an attorney's office. Every step felt slow. Every step mattered. By late afternoon, Corbin had a fuller picture. Not complete, but enough. Darren's move to Denver had happened 3 months earlier. A vehicle registered to him had been upgraded shortly afterward. Publicly available address records placed him in Crescent Heights. Corbin did not need a database to find that. He only needed patience. The apartment complex had a website, glass balconies, heated parking, a fitness center, a rooftop lounge overlooking the city. Corbin looked at the monthly rent range. He closed the page. Hawker watched him. "Yeah." The dog tilted his head. Corbin gathered his coat. Before leaving the hospital, he went back to Althea's room. She was awake. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Denver." Her eyes sharpened. "To Darren?" "Yes." "Corbin." "I'm not going there as a cop." That mattered enough that she waited. "No uniform," he continued. "No department car, no badge on my belt." Althea studied him. "What are you going there as?" Corbin thought about the question. "A brother." She looked unconvinced. "Try being a son, too." He did not answer immediately. Then he nodded. At the SUV, Corbin changed out of his dark navy uniform shirt and into a slate blue Henley beneath his charcoal winter jacket. He placed his badge wallet in the locked console. His duty gear stayed behind. Hawker climbed into the rear seat. Corbin stood outside for a moment before getting in. The parking lot was washed in late winter sunlight, every patch of snow reflecting gold. His phone contained enough numbers to make anger easy. But he knew numbers were not the whole story. Darren had paid real bills. He had helped their mother once. Then, somewhere between responsibility and resentment, something had shifted. Corbin needed to hear where. He got behind the wheel. The route to Denver loaded on the screen. Before pulling away, he looked once toward the hospital windows, then at Hawker in the mirror. This stays simple." Hawker watched him. Corbin started the engine. No badge, no threats, no shortcuts. The shepherd lowered himself onto the seat. Corbin turned onto the highway. For the first time since finding Althea under the streetlight, he was no longer chasing a question. He was heading toward the person who might finally have to answer it. Denver felt warmer than Silver Creek, but only by comparison. The snow along the streets had been pushed into gray-edged banks, and late afternoon light reflected off glass towers and parked cars. Crescent Heights sat above a row of restaurants and boutique shops, all clean lines, large windows, and carefully lit entrances. Corbin parked across the street. For several seconds he stayed behind the wheel. Hawker stood in the back seat, watching him through the gap between the front headrests. Corbin had expected anger to sharpen during the drive. Instead, the closer he got to Darren, the quieter he became. He had spent nearly 3 hours replaying the same facts. The transfers, the missing furniture, the mattress on the floor, Beatrice's message, Althea's insistence that Darren had been having a hard year. None of it fit into a simple shape. That frustrated him. Simple things were easier to deal with. He looked toward the apartment building. "No badge," he murmured. Hawker's ears shifted. Corbin had left it behind as promised. No uniform, no duty belt, no police vehicle. Just a charcoal winter jacket, a slate blue Henley, dark jeans, and the black wristwatch he had worn nearly every day for years. He opened the rear door. Hawker climbed down. The shepherd took a moment to settle his right hip, then stood beside him. "Let's go." The elevator ride to the 4th floor was quiet. Hawker sat beside Corbin's left leg while soft instrumental music played through ceiling speakers. Corbin watched the numbers change above the door. 2, 3. 4. The doors opened. Darren's apartment was near the end of the hall. Corbin knocked once. No answer. He waited. Then knocked again. Footsteps approached. The door opened. Darren Hayes stood there wearing a light gray shirt with the sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms. For a moment neither brother spoke. The resemblance between them had always been strongest around the eyes. Darren's were lighter, more hazel than blue, and his face had kept a softer shape with age. At 41, he still carried the easy, approachable appearance that had helped him talk his way through difficult rooms since adolescence. But the ease vanished when he saw Corbin. His hand remained on the door. His expression emptied. Then his eyes dropped to Hawker. Something tightened at the corner of his mouth. "Corbin!" Corbin looked past him. Warm apartment, polished floors, a wide gray sofa, a television larger than anything Althea had ever owned, a wool rug, framed prints, nothing extravagant enough to announce wealth, everything comfortable enough to make the contrast unavoidable. Darren stepped backward. "You should have called." "I did." Darren looked away. "Yeah." Corbin entered. Hawker followed. Darren closed the door. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Corbin did not wander around inspecting things. He did not need to. Darren stood near the kitchen island, arms loose at his sides. His minimalist silver watch caught the light. Corbin noticed it because Darren had once called him to complain about being unable to afford new tires. "I found Mom." That was all Corbin said. Darren's face changed, not dramatically. The effort holding it together simply stopped. His shoulders lowered, his eyes lost focus for half a second. "Where?" "Outside the old home store on Alder." Darren swallowed. Corbin watched him. She was sitting under a streetlight. Darren looked toward the floor. "She shouldn't have been out." "No?" "She gets confused sometimes." Corbin waited. Darren rubbed one hand over his mouth. "I was going to come back." "When?" No answer. "When, Darren?" "I don't know." Corbin nodded once. It was not agreement. Darren looked toward Hawker. The dog stood beside Corbin, ears forward, body still, not threatening, just present. "You brought him?" "He came with me." Darren gave a short breath. "Of course he did." Corbin remained near the door. That seemed to bother Darren. Perhaps he had expected Corbin to pace, shout, demand, anything he could react against. Instead, Corbin simply said, "Start at the beginning." Darren gave a bitter laugh. "You think there's a beginning?" "There usually is." "You sound like you're interviewing me." "I'm trying not to." "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No?" Darren walked toward the window. Denver spread beyond the glass in bright winter light. "When Mom fell 2 years ago, where were you?" Corbin did not answer. "You were working." "Yes." "You're always working." "Keep going." Darren turned. "I took her to appointments. I dealt with the insurance company. I sat in that house while the furnace guy told me it was going to cost $3,000 we didn't have. I sent the money." "There it is." Corbin's eyes narrowed. Darren laughed again, quieter now. "You always say that." "Because I did." "I know you did." Darren stepped away from the window. "That's the point. You sent it. I handled everything else." The words were not loud. That gave them more weight. Darren continued. "When she called at 1 in the morning, because she thought somebody was outside, I went over. When she forgot whether she'd taken a pill, I checked. When she fell getting out of the shower, I was the one who cleaned up the mess and got her back to bed." Corbin's jaw tightened. "You never told me any of that." "Would it have mattered?" "Yes." Darren stared at him. "Would it?" Corbin did not answer immediately. That pause was enough. Darren looked away. "Exactly." For the first time, Corbin felt the conversation move somewhere he had not expected. Not away from Darren's responsibility, but towards something uglier because part of it was true. Darren had stayed. Corbin had not. Darren dropped onto the sofa. "At first I used the account for what Mom needed." "I saw that." Darren looked up quickly. "You went through it?" "With her permission." A flicker of embarrassment crossed Darren's face. "So you know?" "I know enough?" "No, you know numbers." Corbin's expression hardened. "Then tell me what the numbers don't." Darren leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I was behind." "On what?" "Everything." "Be specific." Darren laughed without humor. "There he is." Corbin said nothing. Darren's hands tightened together. "Credit cards, rent, medical bills from when I tore my shoulder, the truck. I'd been picking up overtime, but it wasn't enough." "So you took from Mom." "I borrowed?" Corbin's face changed slightly. Darren saw it. "Yeah, I know how that sounds now." "How did it sound then?" "Temporary." The answer came quickly. Too quickly. Darren looked down. $200. I told myself I'd put it back Friday." "Did you?" "No." "Then what?" "Another bill came. And then another." Corbin let the silence work. Darren's breathing changed. "I took more." "How much?" "You already know." "I want to hear you say it." Darren stood abruptly. "I don't know, okay?" Corbin remained still. Darren paced toward the kitchen. "I stopped counting the way I should have." "That's convenient." "You think I don't know that?" Darren turned. The first real anger entered his voice. "You know what it's like when everybody in town asks about you?" Corbin frowned. "What?" "Corbin's doing great." Corbin made sergeant. Corbin and his dog were in the paper again. Corbin bought his mother a new furnace. "This is about me now?" "It became about you years ago." Darren pulled at his shirt cuff, straightening it unnecessarily. The nervous habit was so familiar that for 1 second Corbin saw the teenager Darren had been. "Mom would show people the things you bought her," Darren said. She'd tell everybody how you took care of her. His mouth tightened. And I'd be standing right there. Corbin stared at him. You wanted credit? I wanted somebody to notice I was drowning. The room went quiet. Hawker sat down. Darren looked at the dog. You know what the worst part is? Corbin said nothing. I really did love taking care of her. The sentence caught Corbin off guard. Darren looked almost ashamed to say it. At first? He walked back toward the sofa but did not sit. She'd call because the thermostat made some weird noise. I'd complain the whole drive over, then she'd make coffee, and we'd sit there for an hour. His face softened briefly. I knew which groceries she actually ate and which ones she only bought because they were on sale. Corbin listened. Then Darren's expression closed again. But after a while, every time the phone rang, I hated it. He looked at Corbin. And then I hated myself for hating it. That was the first thing Darren said that Corbin believed without reservation. Not because it excused anything, because it sounded ugly enough to be true. Darren sat again. The first thing I sold was the old cabinet in the hallway. Why? I needed cash. And Mom? She didn't use it. That wasn't the question. Darren looked away. She asked where it went. What did you tell her? That we were simplifying. Corbin thought of Beatrice repeating that exact phrase. And she believed you. For a while. Then the TV? Darren nodded. The washer? Another nod. The bed? Darren stopped. The apartment seemed to grow quieter around that word. Corbin's voice lowered. You sold her bed. Darren rubbed both hands over his face. I was going to replace it. With what? I don't know. When? I don't know. Corbin took one slow step closer. Not threatening, just removing some of the distance. Darren looked up. You moved to Denver. Yes. Why? Darren answered after a long pause. Because I couldn't stay there anymore. Corbin's eyes hardened. You mean you couldn't look at the house? Darren said nothing. You couldn't look at her. Still nothing. Corbin had spent the entire drive imagining dozens of questions. Now only one mattered. And Mom? Darren's face collapsed in a way no accusation had managed to produce. Corbin waited. Darren looked toward the window. His eyes filled. But he did not answer. He did not need to. Corbin understood. Darren had not woken up one morning and decided to abandon Althea. That would have been easier to hate. Instead, he had made hundreds of smaller decisions that always favored the problem directly in front of him. His bill, his fear, his resentment, his shame. And eventually, not looking at Althea had become another decision, then another, until she was sitting outside in January with 2 crackers. Corbin's voice stayed quiet. You can tell yourself whatever you need to. Darren closed his eyes. But she was hungry. The words landed harder than shouting could have. Darren bent forward, forearms against his knees. For a while, the only sound in the apartment was his breathing. When he finally began to cry, it was not dramatic. No plea, no performance. Just a man whose explanations had run out. Corbin did not move toward him. He also did not enjoy the sight. That surprised him. He had imagined anger might feel cleaner once Darren admitted it. It did not. Darren wiped his face. What happens now? Corbin looked at him. You return what you can. I don't have it. Then you repay it. Darren swallowed. All of it? All of it. To you? Corbin's expression changed. No. He glanced once toward Hawker, then back at his brother. To Mom. Darren nodded slowly. Corbin walked toward the door. Corbin. He stopped but did not turn. I'm sorry. Corbin stood there for several seconds. I know. That was not forgiveness. It was simply the truth. He opened the door. Hawker followed him into the hallway. Behind them, Darren remained in the apartment. Corbin now understood differently. Not as proof that Darren had always been heartless, as proof of how comfortable a person could become while avoiding what his choices had cost someone else. The elevator doors closed. Corbin looked down at Hawker. The shepherd sat beside him, calm and silent. Corbin rested one hand briefly against the dog's neck. He had come to Denver expecting a villain. He was leaving with something harder to carry. A brother who had once done the right thing, then stopped, and had found a reason for every step along the way. Corbin returned to Silver Creek before midnight. He did not go straight to the hospital. For the first time since finding Althea under the streetlight, he went home to sleep. Not because the urgency had disappeared, because he finally understood that exhaustion was beginning to make decisions for him. Hawker climbed the stairs slowly beside him and settled near the bedroom door without waiting for a command. Corbin lay awake longer than he wanted. Darren's words kept returning. "I was the one who stayed." Corbin did not forgive what had happened, but the sentence had lodged somewhere uncomfortable because part of it was true. By morning, he knew one thing clearly. He could not handle the next part alone. That realization irritated him almost as much as the situation itself. Corbin had spent most of his adult life becoming useful in emergencies. People called him when something had gone wrong. He organized scenes, assigned responsibilities, separated emotion from immediate necessity. It was easy to start believing competence meant ownership. This time, it did not. At 10, he sat across from Gideon Frost in an office above a pharmacy on Main Street. Gideon was 53, lean and long-faced, with salt and pepper hair combed neatly back and a short boxed beard that made him look more like a university professor than the kind of attorney Corbin had imagined calling. A worn brown leather folio rested on the desk between them. Gideon listened without interrupting. That made Corbin uncomfortable. He was accustomed to questions. Gideon simply let the facts accumulate. When Corbin finished, the attorney opened the folio. "First thing," Gideon said, "this is your mother's matter." Corbin nodded. "Not yours." Corbin's expression tightened slightly. "I understand." "I'm not sure you do yet." Corbin looked at him. Gideon continued in the same even tone. "You can help her. You can document. You can support. You can testify to what you personally know. But if your mother has the capacity to make decisions, then she remains the person deciding what happens next." Corbin leaned back. That was not what he had expected to hear first. "What about Darren?" "We deal with Darren according to what can be established." "He admitted it?" "To you?" "Yes." "That matters. It is not the entire process." Corbin looked toward the window. Outside, 2 teenagers were clearing snow from the sidewalk in front of the bookstore. Everything appeared ordinary again. Gideon slid a legal pad closer. "We start by stopping any further access." That part happened quickly. With Althea's consent, the bank removed Darren's authorization from the accounts he had been using. New account protections were added. Automatic payments for utilities and medication were separated from discretionary spending. The next step took longer. Sheila Park's financial review became part of a more formal record. Dates were matched. Transfers were categorized. Receipts were collected where they still existed. Items sold from the house were listed. Some transactions had documentation, others did not. A hospital social worker made a referral to local adult protective services. Corbin hated the phrase the first time he heard it. It made Althea sound helpless. Gideon corrected him without being asked. "Protection doesn't mean taking away her choices." Corbin glanced at him. "It means making sure nobody else takes them." That stayed with him. The process moved slower than anger wanted. There was no single afternoon when everything was fixed. No one walked into Darren's apartment and carried Althea's life back out in boxes. A dining chair turned up at a second-hand store in Denver. The old cabinet had already been resold. The vehicle was gone. The washing machine could not be located. The bed frame had changed hands more than once and was not worth pursuing. Some things could be recovered. Some could only be assigned value. That distinction mattered to Gideon. "To make her whole," he said, "we have to be honest about what cannot literally be returned." Corbin disliked the phrase "make her whole." Nothing about Althea felt like an account balance, but he understood the principle. Darren called 3 days after Corbin returned. Corbin did not answer. He gave the phone to Althea. She looked at the name on the screen for a long time. Then she declined the call. Corbin said nothing. Later that evening she asked, "Was that cruel?" "No. You answered too fast." Corbin looked over from the kitchen table. Althea was staying temporarily in a small furnished recovery apartment connected to the hospital's outpatient program. She wore the gray cardigan from the week before, but her posture was stronger now. Hawker lay near her chair, one front paw resting close to the toe of her slipper. Corbin set down the paperwork in front of him. "It wasn't cruel." Althea studied his face. "I didn't say I'd never talk to him. You don't have to decide today." "That's better." Corbin frowned. "Better than what?" "Than telling me what I'm going to do." He sat back. "Have I been doing that?" Althea gave him a look. Corbin almost laughed. Almost. A week later, Darren sent the first repayment through Gideon's office. It was not much, but it was real. The following week, Gideon called Corbin to confirm Darren had sold his newer vehicle. 2 weeks after that, Darren moved out of Crescent Heights. He did not move home. He found a cheaper apartment outside Denver and began working additional hours. There were also formal consequences: financial monitoring, restrictions on accessing Althea's accounts, required documentation of repayments, ongoing review connected to the Elder financial abuse case. Gideon was careful not to promise outcomes beyond what the process could actually deliver. Corbin appreciated that. The consequence was not one dramatic judgment. It was repetition, month after month, a payment, a record, a limitation, a reminder. Darren would have to live inside the consequences long after the confrontation ended. Corbin thought that might be more meaningful than anything he could have said in Denver. One afternoon, he returned to Althea's temporary apartment carrying groceries. Hawker did not come to greet him. Corbin stopped inside the doorway. The shepherd was lying beside Althea's chair. Althea sat near the window, wearing a sage-green cardigan Corbin had brought from home. Hawker lifted his head. His tail moved once. Then he put his head back down. Corbin looked at him. "So that's how it is now?" Althea glanced over her glasses. "He has good judgment." Corbin set the grocery bags on the counter. "You know he used to follow me everywhere." "Maybe he's matured." "Hawker or me?" "Yes." Corbin laughed. It surprised both of them. The sound felt strange in the room. Not wrong, just unfamiliar. Althea smiled. It was the first smile he had seen from her that did not look borrowed from an old habit. For several minutes they put groceries away together. Corbin handed her cans. She chose where they went. He started to move a box of tea to a higher shelf. Althea stopped him. "Lower." "You can reach that one." "I know." "Then why lower?" "Because I want it lower." Corbin looked at her, then moved it. That tiny moment stayed with him more than it should have. For days, he had been thinking in terms of restoration: get the money back, replace the furniture, fix the house, secure the accounts. But restoration could become another kind of control if he decided what Althea's life should look like without asking. Later, they sat by the window. The afternoon was pale and bright, with new snow falling so lightly that it barely seemed to descend. Althea held a mug of tea. Corbin had already started planning aloud. He could transfer, reduce overtime, maybe take a temporary administrative assignment. He had even considered selling his place in Colorado Springs. Althea let him talk. That should have warned him. When he finished, she asked, "Are you staying because you feel guilty?" Corbin went quiet. The question had no accusation in it. That made it harder. "No." Althea raised one eyebrow. Corbin looked away. "Not only." "That's different." He rubbed his thumb over the edge of his watch. "I should have been here." "Yes." He looked back at her. The honesty caught him off guard. Althea continued, "You should have come more." Corbin said nothing. "And Darren should have asked for help before everything got away from him." Her hands tightened slightly around the mug. "And I should have stopped saying I was fine when I wasn't." Corbin frowned. "This isn't on you." "I didn't say it was." "Sounds like it." "No, it sounds like a family where everybody thought protecting somebody meant not telling the truth." Corbin absorbed that. Althea looked out at the snow. "I needed my sons." Her voice stayed steady. "I never asked either one of you to stop being yourselves." Corbin felt something inside him shift. Not forgiveness, not relief. Perspective. He had been preparing to correct his previous mistake by moving to the opposite extreme. Distance had failed, so he would eliminate distance. Money had failed, so he would personally control every detail. Darren had abandoned responsibility, so Corbin would take all of it. That sounded noble if he said it fast enough. It was still control. "What do you want?" he asked. Althea turned toward him. The question seemed to surprise her. "For now?" "For now. I want to go home when the doctor says I'm ready." "Okay." "I want somebody helping with the medication until I'm stronger." "Okay." "I want my own bank card." Corbin hesitated. Althea noticed. He corrected himself. "Okay." "And I want you to stop looking like somebody's about to write you a ticket every time I disagree with you." That got another laugh out of him. "I can work on that." "I'm sure there's training." Corbin looked down at Hawker. The shepherd was asleep beside her chair. One paw still rested near Althea's slipper. Something about the image made the lesson simpler. Hawker stayed close. He did not decide where Althea sat. He did not decide when she stood. He simply remained available. Corbin had spent years training that dog. Now he wondered whether the dog had understood something first. Before leaving that evening, Corbin pulled on his coat. Hawker opened his eyes. Corbin waited. The shepherd looked at him, then at Althea, and stayed where he was. Corbin shook his head. "Traitor?" Althea smiled. "He's retired. He can choose." Corbin opened the door. Cold air slipped inside. For once, the word choose did not frighten him. It felt like progress. Not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. Money was still missing. The house still needed work. Darren still had obligations ahead of him. Althea still had weeks of recovery. But the direction had changed. Consequences were no longer about Corbin deciding who deserved what. They were about putting responsibility back where it belonged. Darren would answer for what he had taken. Corbin would answer for the distance he had allowed. And Althea, after months of other people making choices around her, would begin making her own again. By late March, Silver Creek still belonged to winter. Snow remained along the fences and beneath the pines, where sunlight rarely reached, but the days had stretched noticeably longer. Afternoon light lingered across the roofs instead of disappearing before people finished dinner, and water had begun dripping steadily from the edges of gutters. The house on Alder Street looked different too. Not new. Corbin had never wanted new. He wanted it to look lived in again. The living room had fresh paint in a muted cream Althea chose after rejecting 3 samples Corbin thought were nearly identical. "They are not identical," she had told him. "They're all beige. One of them is sad beige." Corbin had stared at the wall. Althea had stared at him. He bought the one she wanted. That had become part of the work. Not just repairing things, asking, waiting, letting someone else decide. The new table in the dining room had taken Corbin nearly 2 weeks to finish. He could have bought one in an afternoon. Instead, he found a stack of maple boards at a lumber yard outside town and built it in the garage after work. The legs were slightly heavier than they needed to be, and one corner still showed where he had sanded too aggressively. Althea loved that corner most. It proves a person made it. A person who apparently can't use an orbital sander. That too. Corbin had stopped arguing. The new bed arrived before Althea came home permanently. This time, Corbin did not choose it alone. She tested 3 mattresses, complained about all 3, then returned to the second one. Corbin helped assemble the frame himself. When he tightened the final bolt, he did not experience the dramatic sense of redemption he once expected. He simply sat on the floor for a minute and looked at a bedroom that finally resembled a bedroom again. That was enough. Althea's recovery had been steady, but imperfect. She had regained weight. Her medication schedule was stable. Her hair had been trimmed into a neat silver-brown shape that curled slightly near her jaw, and there was more color in her face. Some mornings she moved through the house with almost all of her old confidence. Other days she misplaced a cup she had been holding 5 minutes earlier, or stood in the hallway trying to remember why she had entered it. Corbin had learned not to react to every forgotten detail like an emergency. That had taken practice. His first instinct was still to solve. Althea's first instinct was still to tell him to stop hovering. Somewhere between those instincts, they had begun finding a rhythm. Hawker had adapted faster than either of them. The shepherd was officially retired now. Corbin had completed the department paperwork 3 weeks earlier. He had expected the moment to hurt. For years, Hawker's harness had meant work, routine, shared purpose. Corbin had imagined retirement would feel like closing a door on a part of both their lives. Instead, Hawker seemed almost relieved. His black K9 harness now hung from a hook in Corbin's mudroom. Most days he wore only his sturdy black collar with the brushed steel tag. Every morning he followed Althea to the kitchen. She made coffee. Hawker sat beside her chair. She ate toast. He watched. Sometimes she gave him nothing. Sometimes Corbin suspected otherwise. "You know he's not supposed to get bacon." Althea looked offended. "I know." Hawker licked his muzzle. Corbin looked at the dog, then at his mother. "Both of you are terrible liars." Althea took another sip of coffee. "Then it's a good thing neither of us works for the police." The change in Hawker was subtle. He still followed Corbin when asked, still responded to commands instantly, still watched doors and unfamiliar movement with the disciplined attention built into years of training. But given a choice, he increasingly chose Althea. If she walked around the block, Hawker went with her. If she sat in the backyard while the snow melted from the garden beds, Hawker lay at her feet. At night, he often slept outside her bedroom door, not because Corbin had trained him to, because he had decided that was where he belonged. One morning, Corbin came downstairs already dressed for work and found Hawker stretched across the hallway. "You coming?" Hawker raised his head. Corbin picked up his keys. The dog looked toward Althea's bedroom, then back at Corbin, and stayed. Corbin stared at him. Unbelievable. From the kitchen, Althea called, "He's retired." "I know. He has options now." "So I've been told." Corbin left alone. He smiled all the way to the car. His own work had changed too. He had not resigned. Althea would never have allowed that, and eventually Corbin admitted he did not truly want to. Being a police officer was part of who he was. The mistake had been treating every other part of his life as something that could be fitted around the edges. He requested a more stable assignment with a unit closer to Silver Creek and accepted that it might slow the upward path his career had been following. His captain asked whether he was sure. Corbin surprised himself with the answer. Yes. No speech, no grand explanation. Just yes. He still worked long days occasionally. Still got called when things went wrong. But he stopped assuming family could wait indefinitely because work felt urgent. That distinction changed more than his schedule. It changed where his attention went. Darren remained outside the easy circle of family life. There was no scene where everyone sat around the same table and decided the past had been repaired. Corbin did not want one. Neither did Althea. Darren continued making payments through Gideon's office. The amounts were not always large, but they arrived. He had moved into a modest apartment outside Denver and was working enough hours that Althea sometimes worried he was exhausting himself. Corbin did not comment. That was Darren's life. Althea spoke with him on the phone occasionally. The first call lasted 7 minutes. The next lasted 12. Sometimes she ended those conversations quietly. Sometimes she looked tired afterward. Corbin learned not to ask. What did he say? The moment she hung up. If she wanted to tell him, she did. One afternoon, she caught him looking at the phone after Darren called. "You're being very good." Corbin frowned. "That sounds dangerous." "You haven't asked me anything." "I figured you'd tell me if you wanted." Althea smiled slightly. "See? Trainable." Hawker, lying beside her chair, lifted his head at the sound of her voice. Corbin pointed at him. "Don't encourage her." The shepherd lowered his head again. Spring approached slowly. One clear afternoon, Corbin finished replacing a loose porch board and sat down with a cup of coffee. Althea came outside wearing the deep teal scarf he had bought before that first drive home. The sight of it caught him every time. Back then, it had been sitting inside a shopping bag next to tea, a practical gift, something useful. He had imagined giving it to a healthy mother in a warm kitchen. Instead, it had become part of everything that followed. Althea settled into the porch chair. Hawker lowered himself between them with a long sigh. Sunlight made the copper-tan fur on his chest look brighter. For a while, nobody said anything. The street was quiet. A snowplow rumbled several blocks away, pushing back the remains of an old bank. Someone's wind chime moved lightly across the road. Althea looked toward Corbin. "How long are you staying this time?" Months earlier, the question would have triggered a calendar in his head. Shift schedule, meetings, court appearances, drive time, obligations. Corbin looked down the street instead. "Long enough to know when you're not okay?" Althea considered that. "That could take some work." Corbin smiled. "I'm a cop. I hear we're supposed to notice things." Althea laughed. Not politely, not weakly, really laughed. Hawker lifted his head as if the sound had interrupted something important. Then he decided otherwise and settled again. Corbin looked at his mother. There had been a time when hearing her laugh would have seemed too ordinary to remember. Now he understood ordinary things differently. They were not guaranteed. They were simply easy to overlook. Later that afternoon, Althea stood. "I'm going around the block." Corbin glanced toward the sky. Clear, dry pavement showing through most of the snow. He checked himself before asking whether she needed anything. Hawker was already standing. Althea wrapped the teal scarf more securely around her neck. "You coming, old man?" Hawker's ears lifted. Corbin frowned. "You better be talking to him." Althea smiled and stepped down from the porch. Hawker walked beside her. His pace adjusted automatically to hers. Corbin remained in the doorway. For 1 second, the image overlapped with another. A streetlight, a cold bench, a thin coat, a paper bag with almost nothing inside, Hawker pulling hard enough to make Corbin stop. The memory no longer struck like a sudden blow. It had become something else. A marker. The point before which Corbin had thought he understood responsibility. And the point after which he began learning. Althea reached the sidewalk. Hawker stayed close to her left leg. There was no emergency waiting around the corner, no hidden account, no confession still to come, no siren. Just his mother walking through late winter sunlight with a retired police dog beside her. Corbin stood there long enough to realize he was doing exactly what he had promised not to do, watching from a distance. Althea reached the end of the driveway. Then she turned. "You coming?" Corbin looked at the coat hanging beside the door. For most of his adult life, he had believed providing for someone was evidence enough that he cared. Money, repairs, solutions, protection, useful things. He still believed those things mattered. He simply understood now that none of them could notice when a voice sounded different. None could see an empty refrigerator. None could sit beside someone who was afraid. None could replace showing up. Corbin took the coat from the hook. "Yeah." He stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind him. Althea waited. Hawker waited too. Corbin caught up with them. Then the three of them continued down the snow-lined street together. Sometimes love does not fail because we stop caring. It fails because we assume someone else is watching closely enough. Corbin learned that providing from a distance was not the same as noticing when his mother's voice changed, when her house grew emptier, or when she needed more than another payment sent on time. The harder lesson was that showing up did not mean taking control of her life either. It meant being present, paying attention, and respecting the person she still was. Maybe there is someone in your own life who keeps saying, "I'm fine." Sometimes the most meaningful thing we can do is not solve everything, but stay long enough to hear what those words are hiding. If this story stayed with you, share what it made you think about in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about loyalty, family, and the choices that quietly change a life, subscribe and stay with us. May you have the wisdom to notice the people who need you and the grace to be there before they have to ask.